am going to be giving you a house tour today. And I always like to start my house tour right here with these two paintings here. These two particular paintings are paintings of Mary Elizabeth Sherman, and this is William Reese. Now, Mary Elizabeth and William were certainly married and built this house. The construction began in about 1834, and was completed in about 1835, although they didn't get to have a housewarming until a few years later. They finally, it said in a letter from Samuel McCracken that they finished the house to the point that it could be shown to the public in a party in 1838. So William and Mary Elizabeth, as I said, built the house, and they built the house in what is known as the Greek Revival style. So there was a few things going on just before this time period that affected the advent of this Greek Revival style. So if we back up a little bit into the 1700s, as Napoleon marched through Greece and Turkey, he had artists that were with him. And this is one of my favorite parts of the story, being an artist myself. One of the first artists that drew alongside Napoleon as they were marching through Greece and Turkey, his name was Denon, D-E-N-O-N. And he drew just profusely while he was there. Drew lots of the ruins, lots of the various things that he saw in Greece and Turkey. His drawings became published as soon as he returned back. As soon as he returned back to the Cairo area and to France, he published his drawings almost all right away. And they were just very, very well received by the world. There was another artist that I don't know the name of that later defected and came to the United States. And he brought his drawings with him as well. And so a lot of the styles of architecture that were being born in the early 1800s, especially Greek Revival started first in New York. And a lot of those early structures were built based on this idea from what they learned from Napoleon's artists in the late 1700s. So I find that really fascinating when you think about artists and how art influences design. And I'll be talking about that when we go to the other room as well. So William and Mary Elizabeth, unfortunately, they did not get to stay in the house for very long. There was a panic, what was known as a panic, in 1839, and the Panic of 1837, and they left the house shortly thereafter. And that panic, it's basically like a recession, like the Great Recession we just recently had. They had to sell everything that they owned. They left the property, went back to Philadelphia, later on came back to Lancaster, but never returned to this house. So just as many different people, come through Lancaster, this house was bought and sold many different times by many different people. But I want to draw your attention to some of the details in the architecture that are specific to the Greek Revival style. Now, just prior to Greek Revival was the federal style of architecture. It lasted up until, really lost its favor in about 1830. Oftentimes you see styles overlapping. So this house really does have some federal style architecture elements in it. For instance, a true Greek Revival home would have been painted white to look like the marble of the Parthenon and all of the beautiful Greek marble buildings. This house was never painted white. It was painted yellow when the yellow brick of the garage was built in the 1900s, but it was never painted white prior to that. So it was always brick. So that is more of a federal style, but it doesn't have some of the other characteristics of a federal style. So we tend to call it the Greek Revival style rather than the federal style. So if you look at the architecture around the top of the frieze and over the door, now the frieze is all plaster at the top. And you see the little figures of the ovals, that's known as the egg and dart. That whole band that's underneath the egg and dart is called the bead and reel. And those are both direct copies of what you would find on some of the Greek temples, that egg and dart. Now, there's lots of theories, ideas from different scholars. Some say that means life and death. The Greeks were really big on nature. Some say that it's more sexual in interpretation. Again, it's all up to the interpretation of the scholars as to how that comes out. I personally like the life and death part of it. The bead and reel is just a little decoration underneath. And then we find lots of leaves and lots of floral designs from the Greek Revival style, from the Greek style. If you look at the door, the uppermost pattern is called the tongue and dart. Again, you know, that idea of the life and death or the nature. And that's that top band above the door. The egg and dart is again repeated. The bead and reel is below. And then you've got some really wonderful rosettes and some anthemion that's there in the center. Now, anthemion, it's just a Greek word for honeysuckle. That's all it is. So it's nothing too fancy. If you want to call it honeysuckle, that is fine. But the true terminology that you find in the Greek Revival, like the books like from Asher Benjamin and Menard McFever, will call it the anthemion. Again, it's repeated on the side of the door as it goes down. Now, directly above that is called the acanthus, another fancy Greek word. It means thistle. It was a large thistle bush that grew in the ancient Greek Isles, and they had these huge thistle leaves that curved like that, and that's what that replicates. So those are very specific designs. If you look at the center medallion above, you see a lot of those designs replicated again. Now, of course, in 1835, this house would not have had electricity. Electricity was added much later. Originally, these particular chandeliers were gas operated. Gas was actually brought first to town at the Fairfield, at the fairgrounds, Lancaster Fairgrounds, around the racetrack, supposedly so they could watch the race going on. And that was when we first saw gas brought, or where we first saw gas brought to town. All of the furniture that's on this side of the house represents the 1835 Greek Revival style. All of this furniture has been acquired by our acquisitions committee. These are not family collections. As I had said, the original family that lived here had to sell all of their belongings and left town. Our oldest piece is the mirror that's there on the wall. And if you are very interested in specific furniture elements or what the provenance is of those, in each one of the rooms you'll find a book like this behind our door, and those have information about each one of the pieces, including the decorative arts that you find, the lamps, the clocks, and things like that. So if you look into the other side of the double parlors, you'll notice that we have a piano that's not related to this era. It was a gift. It's actually a much later piano. What the piano would have looked like in the 1830s would have been like this one here of the pianoforte. This is typical more to what you would have seen in a house like this in the 1830s. Any questions about this side of the house?
Now, Trish,
Yes.
those are, they're plaster or carved wood?
The plaster is along the top of right where the ceiling meets in that frieze. And the wood around the doors is all wood.
A comment that I know a lot of people have asked, since we talk about these lovely portraits and that the originals are next door.
The originals are next door, yes.
This lovely portrait over that dresser,
The,
people ask about, which I know the
Yeah.
answer, but I think it should be.
the portrait that's above that piece of furniture, as well as the portrait that's over there, are typical portraits of this time period. They are not related to anyone in the family. They were purchased by the acquisitions committee just as showing what a portrait from that time period would look like. As Judy said, these are restoration. These are replicas of the original portraits of William and Mary Elizabeth. The originals are next door at the Sherman House. Mary Elizabeth was the eldest sister to William Tecumseh Sherman. William Tecumseh and Mary Elizabeth born next door. This house would not have been here then. William was, he was born Tecumseh, and when his father died, he was adopted by the Ewings, which lives right over here on this corner. So I like to think of this place in here as like their playgrounds, where they would have ran and played as children. It would have been an empty lot then. The Saylor House is the oldest house that's on this property itself. So they, you know, having his best friend living right here, he would have been running back and forth all the time.
Are these original, these chandeliers?
They are not original to 1830s. They were purchased by somebody that lived here in the house later on, probably during the Rising era.
So when the house was restored, these were hanging?
When the house was restored, all of the chandeliers had been removed, and they were on the floor in the upper level of the garage.
Okay.
That was quite fun to be able to walk through and see all the, just like the skeleton of chandeliers all through.
And the mantles, when the house was restored?
When the house was restored, many of the mantles, many of the fireplace surrounds had all been painted a color. Most of them were white, and we were doing something one day where we were trying to clean up some of the paint that had been peeling, and we realized that lo and behold, they were marble underneath. So they were quickly, as quickly as we could, stripped and restored to have the original marble.
And the medallions are plaster or wood?
The medallions are plastered. Now those probably have the most repair work that needed to be done. Some of the frieze needed to be redone, but the plaster, especially the acanthus leaves around the light, they had the most damage done to them.
Mm-hmm. And then the carpet, people ask about that. They love the carpet.
The carpet's beautiful. The
And
carpet,
this is a replacement, but is it the pattern that would have been here?
we don't really know what the pattern was. When we took over the house, it was hardwood floor underneath. Beautiful, but really we didn't have evidence as to what the carpet looked like. So it was mainly just family memory, which was a memory of a later time period. This carpet was hand woven, and if you look carefully, you can see the seams. There's
right here.
one here, one about here. So the loom was about this wide. Here it is, right here. So it was about this wide. And these were hand spun in Philadelphia for us before we opened. This one, the hall, as well as the rising room.
And then people also remarked, they wanted to know if this, all the doorway, was it all originally white paint, or was it ever just natural wood?
That I do not know. Almost all of the wood, even when when the house was built, was painted to look like other wood, like what you see on the doors. This is beautiful hardwood underneath these doors, but they're faux painted to look like other kinds of wood. I'd have to do some research on that. Given the fact that it was a Greek revival, they were probably painted white because of the whole interest of retaining the white marble.
And it would show up all that intricate work.
Yes. And the plaster is white, of course.
Yeah.
So that's a faux finish on that door?
That is a faux finish on the door. All of the doors have a faux finish.
Did Cheryl do that too? or-
Cheryl did not. We hired another artist to do the faux finishing.
And
Cheryl,
what was the reason they did it, instead of leaving it?
I don't know a reason behind it, just that it was in, that was what the trend was. Why? why that was the trend. It's kind of like, why did they paint furniture black in the what, 40s? When they went through and painted it all black, and then a few years later, they did all milk paint, you know?
Okay.
Are these replicas of 1835?
No, the furniture is all from the time period. They're not any replicas of the furniture at all.
It's original?
Not original to the family, but purchased as originals, yes. So, any other questions? All right, well, let's go across and see how different families interpreted the space in different ways.